Hey, welcome back to the Unbelievable Podcast. I am BJ Reidell, back here with my guy, Drew Mahowald, and today we are talking about a 500 football team, your Minnesota Vikings, back to business at 6-6, and have a real opportunity here to make the postseason. Now, that being said, we do have to discuss what got them to the 500 mark, and it wasn't the prettiest of victories, to say the least. So, Drew and I will go through this Vikings-Jaguars game, kind of the ins and outs, what went down. I mean, this was a wild ride. So we've got a lot to cover on that front, and then we'll finish up kind of with the playoff picture, your expectations, our expectations, and kind of lean into what's going to be a very important game later on this week. So, all right, let's get started here. Let's start where we always do. Let's start with Kirk Cousins because I feel like he is kind of an embodiment of sort of this game in that he played very, very well at some points and times, but there was also a handful of moments where you're scratching your head, probably throwing things across the room, yelling at your spouse, something of that nature, which is kind of what this entire team did yesterday against Jacksonville.
Right, yeah, I think like I tweeted that I've never been less pleased with a Vikings win than I was yesterday, and I think you can argue that the Vikings lose to 30 other NFL teams yesterday. And they just happened to play Jacksonville, which was just barely, a bad enough team to play worse than Minnesota. But you're right about Kirk. We'll always start with Kirk, and I think this is the worst game that he has played since the bye week. Which you look at the box score, that's pretty good numbers, right? 305-3. He had the pick six allowed, which kind of kept Jacksonville really in the game. But at the same time, I'm not about to place blame on that play. Clearly there was miscommunication of some kind though, right? Because I think he had, I think Bradbury kind of went out there like it was a screen play, but I haven't seen a screen before where only one lineman goes out there. Plus Dalvin kind of ran the route as if it was more of an intended route versus a screen kind of look for the ball. So something happened there, and ultimately that's on the quarterback to get everybody on the same page. So that's going to be on Kirk ultimately. So that's kind of, I'm going to put that on him. But he did come back, and the thing I like the most really is that he's targeting Justin Jefferson a lot more, and Thielen a lot more, and taking the shots down the field, especially now to Jefferson, giving him chances in one-on-one situations. That's the kind of the big positive for me to take away from this game, for Kirk anyway, is that he's trusting Justin Jefferson more and more, and because that guy needs to get 10 to 15 targets every single game at a minimum. So it's good that the Vikings are kind of going that way, and that's my quick synopsis of Kirk Cousins, but it was pretty meh overall to me. It just happened to be his volume stats went up because of how many plays the Vikings had, because this game extended longer than it should have.
So Cousins was fine yesterday, but Kirk Cousins was also like, he was all of what you like, the from all of the kind of the games that we've created, this sample of what we think Kirk Cousins is as a quarterback. He did pretty much all of that within one game. And the kind of the part that sucks about that is that it was against the Jaguars, which is, we expect him to have the efficiency and, probably even the volume numbers against a team like Jacksonville. You don't expect him to make the bonehead mistakes. And like you said, there was a miscommunication there. It's probably on Dalvin Cook to a degree as well. It sounded like it was probably on Dalvin Cook. But you're right too. Like, you can't make that throw. If you got to sense the miscommunication. I don't even think that's possible. I'm asking the guy to be clairvoyant, and you can't be. So it's not fair, but it is
the quarterback's responsibility there. Like, exactly. Clearly, and it's not like Dalvin was the only one who didn't get the right call. Again, you don't see one offensive lineman going out for a screen play on a screen normally. It's multiple. It's 2-3 linemen that are leaving their blocks to go block for the runner after he catches the ball, and there was only one. So something happened there where somebody got the wrong play call, or a couple guys got the wrong play call. So that is ultimately on Kirk to make sure that, is everybody's on the same page there. So that pick six is going to be on him. And
really, you could say the same, like really use the exact same analysis for the fumble too, because Dalvin Cook probably did something wrong there. I think it was on him. The statistics are going to place that on Kirk, just for the record, by the way. So when you're looking at the stats and you're not seeing a Dalvin fumble and you're seeing a Kirk one and wondering what's going on, like I did like 3 times yesterday.
Well, if you have Dalvin Cook in your fantasy team and you didn't get punished for that, it's because they gave it to Kirk Cousins.
Right. So that's again, it's a situation where we're really, we can kind of define this team's performance by the performance of its, 2 primary ball handlers in Kirk Cousins and Dalvin Cook, because both of those players were good enough. They were not efficient. They were not at their best, but they had some moments that really sparked kind of the rest of this team to get it done, to get over the hump. But the hump, like you said, is the Jaguars this week. It's a very small hump. We're not talking about Tampa Bay, which is
not a very uphill climb to get over the hump.
Exactly. So my point is that they were good enough this week, which unfortunately doesn't inspire a lot of, hope or faith just on this one individual performance. It doesn't add anything, doesn't really take anything away because they didn't lose. Because I've seen them play better recently, so I can kind of knock this off as, an inefficient game, maybe a team that was looking on ahead a little bit, something like that, because they didn't lose. Just that's the one reason.
Yeah.
Ultimately, they get the tally in the win column. That's worth celebrating in itself because it gets you back to 500. It gets you back in a position where, with the Cardinals losing, like we'll talk about, I'm sure, puts you in the postseason if the season ended today. So does it really matter that Kirk Cousins and Dalvin Cook weren't at their very best? No, because there's no major takeaways from it. I didn't get anything one way or the other, and they won. So I'm cool with it. Now, that being said, if we're judging this individual game, this was a C performance from both guys. Both guys did not do enough to win on most nights.
Yeah. I mean, against Tampa Bay, for example, next week, that's not going to be enough to win. Now,
yeah.
The one thing I've always said about Kirk is 90% of the time he's pretty darn good, right? He's accurate when he gets time to throw. He throws absolute darts more often than not. But then the mistakes that he makes are so backbreaking, and they have such a big impact. Like, he makes them at the worst possible time. So in this game, the pick 6, right? It's not just an interception. He throws a pick 6.
At the start of the half.
Right. The Dalvin fumble isn't just a fumble. It's at, the Jacksonville, 4-3, 2-yard line when the fumble is committed. And again, these mistakes may or may not be his fault. I don't have the football acumen or the inside knowledge to know who was at fault in each of these scenarios. But clearly Kirk had the ball, and then the ball ended up in Jacksonville's possession on that play. So he's going to be at fault. So that's the thing about Kirk. And like you said, this game kind of, summed up everything about the Kirk Cousins experience a little bit, where, there was the key mistakes that really swung the game and the win probability, so to speak. There was some key moments, some great throws, dimes. The couple throws to Jefferson were really nice. Couple throws to Thielen on some comeback routes. The touchdown throw to Thielen was super nice. So it's all of it into one. And then the result there is you kind of beat a bad team, not very handily, but overall, kind of get this one out of the way. Hopefully Kirk returns to that kind of post-bye week form that we've seen the past few weeks prior to this, moving forward against some tougher competition.
Absolutely. So you look at what the receivers did. I think the output was, above average to say the least from both Jefferson and Thielen. Didn't really get anyone else involved. It was nice to see C.J. Ham score, of course, but again, there's not much predictive value from that, so not a whole lot of takeaways. It's just nice to see the big guy get in there as a fullback, especially. So the rest of the offense, really, there isn't a whole lot more to write home about. I mean, Jefferson, I think
I did not like how many carries Dalvin Cook, how many touches he handled. And I know it's part of it is just how many plays the Vikings ran because of how the game extended itself. But Dalvin Cook is your, $12 to $15 million per year running back.
Right.
That's a guy you need for the future, and you need to save the hits he can take, right? Giving him 32 carries and 6 catches or something like that. That's too much on one Sunday, especially for a guy who has some sort of an injury history. And I'm not, and Dalvin said before to the media, I want to take as many hits as I can. I want the ball, 50 times a game if it comes to that. He wants the ball, but it's just the nature of the running back position. You're risking a long-term injury every time he touches the ball. You want to minimize that. So I would have liked to see more Abdullah, more Mike Boone in this game, even with Madison out. But of course, it sounds like Dalvin Cook was okay health-wise, but that's just something moving forward that I would pay attention to, is limiting Dalvin Cook and the touches that he gets, because that's the guy you want on your team ready to play every single week. And there's, of course, risk with every carry he gets.
Right. 32 carries, 6 receptions, another 3 targets that fell incomplete. Could have been up to 41 touches for Dalvin Cook, even in an overtime game.
That's a very busy afternoon.
Yeah, that's a little excessive, even in an overtime game. Justin Jefferson, of course, we could spend the rest of the show talking about his excellence. The route running is phenomenal. The way he broke away and created kind of space for himself on that. I don't even know how to describe the route. It's basically went to the center of the field and went out, or came back out to
kind of like an extended pivot route almost. Yeah,
something like that. It was 15 yards down, 12 yards downfield or whatever, and the separation he creates on just one hard plant into the ground is exceptional for especially for anyone in the league, but for a player at his age, it's starting to become like
he does little things too. Like he's like it's for his head. Like he's looking back at the quarterback and he swings his hips so quick, and it's just everything, the little things, the little details that like Adam Thielen has been doing for a few years to sell routes. He's already doing.
Did you watch? Did you happen to catch any of that Chiefs Broncos game, the late night? Okay, so did you pay any attention to Jerry Jeudy at all during that game?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, what
there was to pay attention of.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so my point here is like Justin Jefferson has now surpassed kind of the expectation for what he was supposed to do as a rookie, as a first round pick, mind you. He has now reached kind of the steal territory, and I made kind of like a stupid comment about this on Twitter that like it's hard to get a steal in the first round, but I think the Vikings did it. And what I mean by that is that when you watch Jerry Jeudy play, and I think every single person, myself included, I think you probably as well, everyone listening to this show, thought that Jerry Jeudy was the better prospect than Justin Jefferson. Now, watching them play both in the same day, I don't think the defenses were considerably more challenging one or the other. I don't think Kansas City's defense is that great.
Defense isn't good.
Right. So my point being is seeing them within like a 3-hour span, we've reached the territory now where we're speaking of Justin Jefferson. Like, why didn't anyone not see that he is arguably the best in the entire draft?
Yeah, I mean, I think people just over-evaluated him. Like you saw the senior year and how LSU in particular put him in the slot all the time, and they're like, "Well, this is a slot guy, so how valuable is a slot guy?" Right. Not considering the fact that he had the skill set, the intangibles to go outside and be a full-time X receiver, right? So. And I was one of those people. I kind of knocked him down my list, and I think I'm not alone there. Where we
all looked for the issues, right? We tried to find the concerns, and honestly, you're going to find concerns with every prospect for the most part, right? How apparent they are is kind of the determining factor of how good that rookie season is going to go.
Yeah.
And let's be real here. Justin Jefferson has covered up basically every issue that we have presented for his rookie's campaign. I mean,
he wins off the line, right? I think that might have been the biggest.
My biggest concern was press
coverage,
getting some sort of space, and literally, like he does it every afternoon on every route. It's not just like he pops up on a good route here and there. He's playing every route at a very, very high level, and it's ridiculous because you feel fortunate, right? Like as a fan, like you get this guy, hopefully for the next decade,
and. Yeah, well, and the thing about –
he probably didn't deserve them based off of what we know now about these receivers in this class.
Right, and the thing is, like, for the longest time, I've been on this side. Like, the Vikings should not have traded Stephon Diggs. Right. Dumb deal to give away a star receiver like that. Like, even if he wanted out, like, you got to – he's the better, I guess, guy for the future, right? You want to focus on keeping your 2-star receivers or most valuable positions on your team outside of quarterback, of course. But now you look back at it and you get Justin Jefferson out of the deal. You get all these picks with it as well. Jefferson is this far advanced already in his career. Like, I
would
think
it's a true win-win with the contract involved?
Right, and then the contract, the money saved. Yep.
They were making that. They're kind of making that comparison now. I mean, we're in week 12. We can start to talk about Justin Jefferson as not just a rookie guy that's a flash in the pan anymore. He's doing this consistently. So you start. The broadcasters were talking about just the idea that you're paying Stephon Diggs all this money. The Vikings were paying him all this money. Now, of course, that shifts to Buffalo. Now they're paying Justin Jefferson a rookie first-round pick, late first-round pick salary to get maybe something better. And I'm not saying he's a better player than Stephon Diggs.
Yeah, I won't go there either, but
I'm definitely saying the Vikings are using him better than they used Stephon Diggs the last 2 years.
They are, yep. So that was something that Diggs always – I mean, that was always frustrating for me was Diggs not getting the targets and – starting to anyway now give Jefferson the adequate amount of targets that he deserves. Someone of his caliber should be getting to take advantage of defenses. So that's good to see. That's a great sign. And I mean, Thielen and Jefferson together, it's already way better than we expect it to be in 2 to 3 years when Jefferson is kind of matured into the NFL. And so that's a big reason why the Vikings are humming along offensively the way they are. And he's saving Kirk Cousins' tail on a lot of these plays where Kirk kind of is giving him chances. And I applaud Kirk for doing that. Like, that's one of the things that frustrates a lot of fans, myself included, is he just doesn't trust his guys one-on-one a lot. But he's doing that more with Jefferson. Jefferson's making it pay off. He's making those contested catches down the field. So that's, now Kirk's building that trust, and we'll see that more, I would assume, down the stretch here.
Absolutely. So between the two of them, Jefferson 12 targets, Thielen 11. That's 23 of the pass attempts for Kirk Cousins is 42. I'd be okay with that number even going up a little bit. He completed 17 of those passes, so nearly, a 70% clip, 2 touchdowns, all just a hair shy of 200 yards. Amp that up a little bit. You could target the two of those guys 12, 15 times a piece, and I'd be cool with it. You don't need to spread the ball around. You don't need to spread it around too much because you got two absolute studs, and they're proving it week in and week out. Right. So that being said, let's shift over to the defense here because I do think there are some notable moments for the defense in this game.
There's 3 guys I really want to talk about, but
let's start with Cam Dantzler.
Cam Dantzler. Best game of his career by a long way.
Absolutely. And this is a projection game too. This isn't just like I texted my buddy during this game because I was saying, okay, is this a breakout game for Cameron Dantzler? And I think the argument there is like, okay, maybe you need to see a little bit more because he's been okay before. And maybe this is just a flash in the pan type of thing. You got to see it a couple more weeks before it really becomes, a breakout month for this guy. And you look at kind of what you saw from him yesterday, and it's a lot of things that pop out, things that translate, immediately. Instincts, for one, is the one thing that is kind of the major, being around the ball. It's impossible to project that. There's no good number for it, but there's some guys that just are around the ball more than others or seem to know how to pop it loose more than others. Charles Tillman is probably the most shining example of this, of just being a guy who always seems to have his hand on the ball and it always seems to come loose. I'm not saying Cameron Dantzler is like that, but the game that he played was Peanut Tillman-esque because he was literally there all the time. He's forcing fumbles, recovering them, interceptions at key moments, stepping up when the Vikings needed him to step up. And he's doing all of this within the Zimmer system, which we know takes time, but you're starting to see results now. And that was a full game for Cam Dantzler. He played well from front to back. There wasn't a moment in that game where I was thinking this guy looks like a rookie. It looked like he's starting to kind of get to the point where you can trust him at the very least as a number 2 guy.
Well, and Jacksonville's receivers are not bad. Like, we think of Jacksonville as this lowly team that, doesn't have the roster to compete, and they don't. But at receiver, they have some guys that can play. And he was on DJ Chark for a lot of the game, kept him in check at a, very high rate. So Cameron Dantzler was the top guy I wanted to discuss. And then one thing, too, we should mention is Eric Kendricks, which was, I know, very surprising for all Vikings fans that are paying attention. And suddenly he's not there, and you're relying on Todd Davis to come in. And, right away you saw, okay, well, and then Glennon marches them down the field. They score. You're thinking, oh, it's going to be a long day. But I commend the Vikings defense. I commend Mike Zimmer for covering that up as they did. I thought the defense played pretty darn well after that, limiting things, forcing field goals. Of course, they got a lot more pressure down the stretch of that game, and Ofadio Denebo had a great day getting to Mike Glennon. So the defense overall was pretty well done, despite not having Eric Kendricks there as they have all season.
17 points. I mean, that's not bad.
Right.
You'll take that.
Yeah. So overall, you can't ask for a ton more from the defense, given how young, inexperienced the roster is. And again, Ofadio Denebo, great day getting the pass. I think he had 8 or 9 pressures. And then how about this Brailford? Hadn't even heard of the name, but he comes in with, I think, 2 of the most important plays of the game. Yeah. He was in on the safety. He had the fumble forced. A couple of big plays from him too.
Yeah. I still don't know who that is, for what it's worth. I see the name in the box score just like you all.
And the number 67, which is hideous to look at for a defensive player.
Yeah, I know nothing else about him. But I think the Kendricks point is important here too. The broadcasters were talking about kind of like the shock value, and that the Vikings may have just been like shocked. I don't ever buy that narrative. I think it's really stupid because I don't think anyone's shocked by an injury. especially in this industry. I mean, players get hurt all the time. This isn't shock. This was a failure to adjust immediately, which, like you said, the Vikings were able to kind of figure out, and Mike Zimmer was able to kind of, identify the issues that were presenting itself without Eric Kendricks in the lineup, and basically, for the most part, figure it out. Now, long term, obviously, I want to know more about what's going on there. It's concerning, especially because you feel like you need that guy to beat a team like Tampa Bay.
Oh, yeah.
You can get away with it against Jacksonville. You can't against these, Tampa Bay and New Orleans who are coming up here. So that makes me nervous, but I'm sure we'll know more later on this week and kind of, we can talk about that more at that point. The Odenigbo point can kind of, we can extend that even further now because, he's kind of got his own little storyline going on this season, right? We thought he was going to be the starter coming into the regular season, coming into the, quote, preseason. They trade for Yannick Ngakoue. He kind of throws a very minor tantrum and doesn't really get what he wants.
By tantrum, you mean like sends a couple of digs tweets
where
it's kind of like, yeah. You just kind of say some things that people
social
can take
media
the way
tantrum.
They want. Yeah, sure.
He does that shtick. Nothing comes out of it. He gets, sparing playing time, and then they trade Ngakoue. He gets his job back, and we kind of questioned, does he deserve his job back? Did he play well enough in his, in his time spent to be a starter? And I think we've gotten that answer now because, to be a starter in the league, you don't need to be Everson Griffin. You don't need to be, Ray Edwards. You just got to be good enough, right? You got to be good enough to hold your ground. And so I think he's accomplished that feat in the last 3 weeks. And I think this week he's adding value now, right? This is a big time moment to get that safety. That flip the field, it gives you 2 points on the board to extend the lead. I believe at that point the Vikings were up by 3, so it became not just a field goal game anymore. It became a touchdown game. So that's huge. And same can be said for Cameron Dancer, by the way. The interception stopped the bleeding immediately, and then later on the fumble recovery.
That was a turning point for the defense.
For sure, absolutely. So you can say the same thing about him as well. But Odenigbo came up huge for this team. And, as a whole, I think that you're right. Timeliness was kind of a theme for this defense. When the offense was, putzing around, not getting anything done, the defense kind of came up with the big enough plays to get this thing done. And this isn't just Dantzler and Odenigbo. This is Harrison Smith in overtime as well. I mean, I think there was a moment for all of us where we all felt like, when the Vikings went, 3 and backward in overtime, that this game was going to go the wrong way. Harrison Smith steps in and, kind of gives us,
also great, by the way, special teams was good in overtime. We have to give them that. I mean, they got the punt that they were backed up deep in their own territory there based on the offense that first possession.
Nothing's
flipped
really
the field
changed.
Position. Dan Chizina made a tackle, which that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
That made a tackle. It pinned the Jags deep, and then, of course, the Smith interception that you're talking about.
Right. So I think that you got enough to win – This defense, if you get this defensive output every week, it's going to win a lot of games. I don't think you can get this defensive output against, quarterbacks not named Mike Glennon because he most quarterbacks probably don't throw that interception to Harrison Smith. I think that's a bottom tier quarterback interception right there. So yes, the Vikings had a lot of bones thrown their way, and yes, it's also true that they made a lot of splash plays that were, important against any professional football player, right? The game is still the game. And that's a John Madden quote, but it's still you still got to play the guy that's in front of you. And yes, the Jaguars suck. Yes, I was very disappointed in the way the Vikings played, but ultimately we're all going to forget about this game, but we're not going to forget that they got to 500 this week. So you did enough. And to me, the defense did more than enough because they covered up some of the holes that, along with Kirk Cousins, that the Vikings dug for themselves throughout this game.
Defense definitely outplayed the offense, which I didn't see coming, at kickoff when Eric Kendricks was ruled out. But, you take away the pick six and you take away the fumble at the goal line and that's potentially a 14-point swing there in this game because you give the Jaguars a touchdown, you take away potentially a touchdown for the Vikings there. So Vikings outplayed the Jags, but it's just back-breaking mistakes that kind of kept Jacksonville in this game. So, I mean, overall, you don't love the way the Vikings played. It was ugly, but they won. And it has to be better against Tampa Bay, but they're in position right now, and technically they go to Lambeau in the wild card round if the playoffs were to commence or begin starting today. So we kind of get to that point.
Let's get into that now. I think
actually, well, before we do that, one more point I want to make. Before regulation ended, when the Vikings were marching down trying to set up a Dan Bailey field goal, it was a third down and one, I believe, right? The Vikings I think they had a timeout left in 20-something seconds. Kubiak dials up a deep shot down the right sideline for Adam Thielen, which I believe was contested really well, maybe double covered. Incomplete. There's still 19 seconds left or so on the clock when there's no reason, right? No reason to give Jacksonville any time there. You run the ball. If you get your first down, great. If not, it's fourth down. You stop the clock with 3 seconds left. You kick the field goal.
Right.
That is one point I wanted to make. That is the most insane coaching blunder decision I've seen from the Vikings in a while. And there has been some challenges that I've questioned. There has been some mistakes I've seen. That was unbelievable to me. So just wanted to point that out.
The timeout is what got me there. The timeout pissed me off because you could have
the game management that final 30 seconds just as a whole was just not good.
The Vikings did, again, if Dan Bailey misses that field goal and this becomes a tie situation or Jacksonville goes down and win, we're raising hell because everything went wrong. The Vikings did so many things to try to lose.
McLaughlin makes that kick at the end of regulation, we're only talking about this, what I'm bringing up right now. That's the only thing we're talking about.
It's over. They did not play a good enough football game to beat, like you said, 30 other teams in this league. Hell, they probably couldn't have beat themselves if they played like this yesterday because that wasn't good enough. But my point here is that, we know what the Vikings are enough to kind of float away some of these mistakes. Yes, I'm still concerned about the late game back-breaking turnover by Kirk Cousins. That hasn't changed. You added a little bit of fodder to that yesterday, I suppose. But I still trust the Vikings to be better than this in terms of the turnover battle. I think they'll win that more often than not. And there's some good things here as well. But really the main thing here is the fact they put the tally in the win column. That's all that matters because you get to 500, and like you said, you get to the 7th seed, and we've reached this point now where we can start to project. We can feel comfortable in projecting this team in December. You got 4 games to play. You know exactly what you need to do to get there. The question is how confident are you? So Drew set up this poll on Twitter, and why don't you explain that to us and break down the results?
Yeah. So I just asked our followers, where do the Vikings end up when it's all said and done after week 17? With the options being they win the NFC North, which is still possible. They are 3 games behind the Packers. So it would take something kind of nuts for that to happen. But only 6% of people think that's going to happen, which I commend their optimism. But a 5 or 6 seed, 10% said that. The 7 seeds, 38%, and then 46%, nearly the majority, said out of the playoffs for the Vikings at the end of the season. So still not a lot of optimism surrounding the Vikings' playoff chances the rest of the season, even though they are currently in the 7 seed right now, which is a little bit surprising. But I know this Vikings fan base can be a little pessimistic at times, and I'm guilty of it as well. But again, it's worth pointing out that the Cardinals are free falling right now. If they hadn't converted that Hail Mary at the end of the Buffalo game, they would have 5 straight losses right now. And their remaining schedule goes at the Giants, who, by the way, are playing really well, just beat Seattle. Then they play Philly, the Niners, and then the Rams once again. So Cardinals' schedule is not exactly easy. I would say it's very comparable to the difficulty the Vikings have coming up. It's possible that the Vikings can go 2-2 the rest of the way and still have that 7 seed, in my opinion.
Right. So let's take a look at this playoff picture before we give you kind of our perception of where we stand, right? Saints are up top at 10-2. We're speaking strictly of the NFC, of course. Packers at second, 9-3. Rams 8-4, coming off that win over Arizona. The Giants, like you said, coming off that win over Seattle at 5-7, are the 4 seed. Seattle drops to the 5 seed with their loss. They're now the first wild card team at 8-4. Tampa Bay 7-5, also a wild card team, and then your Minnesota Vikings, the number 7 seed, the new number 7 seed, I should say, at 6-6. Now the teams that are right around them, quote, what the Vikings were last week, in the hunt, as everyone loves to say, are the Cardinals at 6-6, coming off that loss. The San Francisco 49ers at 5-6, and the free-falling Bears, who have basically gotten themselves out of the playoff picture by way of one of the most depressing losses I've ever seen this past weekend against Detroit. Both those teams stand at 5-7. So really, you're looking at the teams that you can kind of climb on and the teams that might kind of pass you. And that's San Francisco, Arizona, and Tampa Bay as far as I'm concerned, because the Vikings lost to Seattle earlier this season. So to me, the best they could do is the 6th seed. That's the most it's possible, it's plausible, it's logical.
I mean, if they beat Tampa Bay next week, they will be in the 6th seed.
That's my point. I can get behind the claim of they might be the 6th seed. Anything above that, I can't do, because it's just not going to happen. I can't get behind, as a fan, I can be excited and say, yeah, okay, maybe they have a shot. No, I don't think so. Objectively, the 6th is the best thing that they can do for themselves as far as I'm concerned. So that takes beating Tampa Bay next week, which we'll break down further. But early in this week, I am inclined to say they'll probably lose that game. So I'm thinking that the two real options are 7 seed, barely squeaking in, or out. And right now, kind of on the high that I am with this, winning 5 out of the last 6, I'm going to say they're going to get in, because you got 4 games remaining. There's not that much season left. It's just December, right? December, and entering December, the Vikings look mostly very good. Try to phase out the bad moments and just remember that they won yesterday. They've been mostly pretty good for about 5 weeks now. There's been significant improvement from the young players, Gladney and Dantzler especially. I mean, obviously Justin Jefferson, you're getting a ton of contributions you weren't expecting to get from guys like Odenigbo. There are other pieces in the inside that have, every once in a while have shown up too. Eric Wilson, of course. You're here. Kind of what these teams are. Are there still questions to answer about the Vikings and the Cardinals? Yes. But I think for the most part, we can judge who they are and who's more likely to get there. And I think right now the Vikings probably have the inside track. So I would lean that they're going to be a playoff team. But I'll be very concerned in just 2 weeks here. If they lose the next 2, they're basically, in my mind, you hand it back over to Arizona and it's over. So things can swing real quick here, but I am inclined to say that they're going to get in at this point. That's where I would have voted in the poll.
We'll see. Yeah, because, 2 of your games are against Chicago and Detroit, who, and we said this before, right? They should win some of these games, and then they end up not doing so. It's happened a couple times this year, but yeah, and it almost happened again this weekend. So, that type of argument is almost worthless, but I with considering everything, I feel like the schedules are pretty similar. Where the Cardinals yet have to go to and play the Rams at their place, and the Rams are looking pretty darn good right now. And again, they have the Giants who are playing pretty well. They got to play Philly and then the Niners, who are also still in it as well. So
a little concerned about the Niners. I think they make
Monday
me a
night
nervous.
if they beat Buffalo tonight. Now, those listening to this will have the answer to that by the time the show is up. But the Bills could effectively, I shouldn't say eliminate them, but they could definitely help us out by beating the Niners tonight. But
Sure.
The Vikings are somehow, some way, they're in the driver's seat, control their own destiny for actually a 6th seed right now, and potentially more than that. So we're, the Vikings are there. I'm gonna, if I was betting, if it was my life, a life or death situation, I'd bet on them not making the playoffs. But I'm gonna, you got to
be here.
It's fun. It's fun to have this discussion and the in the hunt type of thing. Although the Vikings are technically not in the hunt anymore based on those playoff pictures, so that's kind of the end of an era.
It makes me smile. I love it so much. I love the stupid media, like things that just they do no matter what every year. I love in the hunt. I love the playoff picture.
Well, especially when it's week 17 and there's a team that's 6-8. They need 14 games to go their way, and it's in the hunt.
Yeah, they're 6-8-1. They need the Raiders to lose at home to the Rams. They need the Bills to win by 4. There's a Tim Kirchin stat mixed into a playoff picture. It's great. But yeah, I'm honestly, I'm just excited to be here. It's one of those situations where it's I have very little confidence. I have very little arrogance. I'm just happy that the Vikings are in this thing in December. And yes, like I just said, this whole thing can come tumbling down in the next 2 weeks, and it will be all for naught, and will be kind of a typical Minnesota sports situation. But the point is that they have the shot, and we didn't think we were going to get this shot.
Oh, absolutely not.
So
absolutely not.
For that reason, I'm really happy, and I do think that the Vikings have a legitimate shot too. I think that's part of it here too. It's not just hope. I really do think that they can beat Tampa Bay. Am I ready to project that this game is going to be a win for the Vikings? No. I want to see the injury reports. I want to see a lot of different things before I really feel comfortable with making that assertion. But I think it's plausible, and I think they have, lended reason to believe that they can. And Tampa Bay, on the flip side, they've also lended reason to believe that they're vulnerable. So,
oh yeah. Now the problem is this is not a primetime game, so that could be reason to, have less confidence because Brady's been terrible in primetime. Like Kirk has this reputation being bad in primetime. Brady has been terrible lately in primetime. But unfortunately, this is your afternoon, I think 3:30 slot for Fox. But anyway, I do think Brady is the type of quarterback that Zimmer could take advantage of. Like they're not very mobile, has very clear tendencies. Yeah, so it'll be interesting. The Zimmer versus Arians kind of matchup is very, very fun to look at.
Also, the Brady versus Arians matchup is kind of fun to think about too. Because
too.
I feel like when you bring that up now, like the fact that Zimmer is like the type of defensive coordinator who could split, an offense that is like thinking one way is better than the other, because he can implement a system and kind of foil your best plan, right? Like that's what he's done best for his entire career, and he's innovative and coming up with random solutions on the fly. This might be, if the Vikings win this might be kind of the explosion game for Arians versus Brady that's been sort of developing. Just something to think about and something to kind of turn our news cycle here in Minnesota as we gear up for a potential to be above 500 and, deeper in this playoff picture with, a feasible path here that I guess, none of us thought was possible even 3 weeks ago, probably. Maybe even 2 weeks ago against Dallas. I didn't really think we'd be here either. So it's just nice to be here. I stand by that. So with that being said, do you have any final closing thoughts for me? Anything that we didn't cover throughout the show here that you'd like to get in quick before we close things down?
Not really. Just other than that, go Bills, right? Bills Mafia tonight.
Yep.
Hopefully that turns out for us.
Absolutely. And definitely fire Marwin, by the way. Special teams coordinator. Why does he still have a job? Don't get it. Still confused. Wondering
the one
why.
thing that was going well special teams wise was Dan Bailey making kicks, and now we can't rely on that. So
exactly.
That might not be his fault, but we have a scapegoat now.
I'm get rid of him. He's got to go. Just say goodbye. I'm done. So I'm going to say goodbye now. Thank you as always for listening to the show. We appreciate that. You can find us on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, and wherever else you listen to your podcasts. We're also available on YouTube as well if you prefer to watch the show. And Drew and I talk on a Zoom meeting, basically. And then you can find us on Daily Norseman as well. Make sure to check that out. The rest of the Climbing the Pocket team posts their stuff there as well, so you can find that stuff there too. So thanks as always for listening, and we will catch you guys later on this week.